Hello, my name's Norman Stevens, and I'm the Gilding Conservator at the Royal Pavilion here. My involvement in this room has taken a number of years, and as you can see, we're just getting to the completion stage now, fixing pilasters and just the fitted furniture going back onto the walls. Most of my time working in this room has been working on gilded surfaces. We have here crestings above the silks, and on the window wall palmits above the curtains. Having a close look at these palmits and crestings, there was very little additions of gilding or retouching, suggesting that they may actually be Regency gilding. So the idea was just to consolidate them, to clean them, and conserving what we thought was original. Conservation and restoration, two quite separate things. Talking about our palmits, trying to save original Regency gilding, so cleaning, and then where we haven't got the original or we've got to make it up, then we end up with contemporary or new work. It's not guesswork. We don't do what we choose. It's a little bit of research, going over the original ornaments and finding out what the original intention was for that artifact, that frame or that piece of furniture. An original is studied most closely, and the woodcarver keeps as close as possible to the original. As part of our investigations into the papier-mâché frames, which we know not to be original to this room, we discovered that those were in quite a bad state, having a bronze painted layer over them. Underneath that bronze painted layer, I did discover some oil gilding, but it was decided to change that oil gilding to water gilding. We rather felt as a team that we could alter that oil gilded layer to match the crestings and the palmits. The difference being that the water gilding is far more subtle, and one can burnish it as well. So you end up with matte areas and burnished areas. Let me give you an idea. We've been talking about water gilding, the process of it. Once the woodcarver has finished carving, the gilder or the gilding conservator then takes over and applies gesso. Gesso is basically chalk, and it's bound with an animal glue. Once many layers of gesso have been brushed on to the carved ornament, we then move on to a colour, an ochre clay, and this gives the gilding a lovely surface to sit on. If you find that there's very detailed areas of carving, very difficult for gilders to get gold down into those very deep areas, or what they call the deep undercuts. So that is where the yellow is a very useful colour. We then go on to the next stage, and we put on what they call the bowl. It's a clay, it's a natural clay, and you can see here it comes in different colours. And this, as I say, it's not a whim of the gilder, what shall I use, but following a tradition, a process of studying the original, finding the right colour and matching to that original colour. And finally, when your ornament is ready to be gilded, gold, being so fine, will stick to anything that has a slight moisture content to it. One chooses an area to what they call wet up, and we simply use a sable brush dipped in water, brushed over the surface of the bowl. The water is immediately soaked into the very absorbent gesso ground and reactivates the animal glues that we use to bind that gesso and the bowl. The gold is then picked up with the tip and brought over to the wet surface and laid onto that wet surface. You can see how gilders need half a dozen pairs of hands at this stage. You need to wet up this, just a small area, and as it's just about wet, the gold leaf will be sucked down onto the surface. Once the gilding process is complete, the other specialised tool that we use is an agate burnisher. Here you can see I'm actually using this agate burnisher. The idea of it is that it's lightly pressed onto the gilded surface, and what it's doing, somebody said to me, oh, you're polishing the gold. Well, in fact, quite true, I suppose, but really what you're doing, the gold is so thin, you are actually compressing all those layers that you've rubbed down on this chalk ground. And as you compress them, you can see that the surface takes on this burnish. You can see the lovely burnishes on this sunflower, this strange end to the tail left completely in matte gold. You can see how it stands out from the rest. Here in the Royal Pavilion, we have to go from an original ornament and find out where the original burnishes were. And we copy those burnishes as far as we can. This is one of the original sunflowers here, and this one is a copy carved a couple of years ago. The tops of these leaves had been highly burnished, and of course all the little sunflower berries on the inside. So talking about the burnish and matte gilding, we also have textured gilding, and it's oil gilding over a layer of sand. Again, that requires a little bit of investigation to get the right heaviness of the sanded particles. And here on all our skirtings we have the textured finish, and then on top of that a rather pleasant roll moulding that is just oil gilded but is smooth. So again, Robert Jones, we have this idea that he's playing one finish off against another.